Hello, everyone. Apologies for me being late. I'm a human being and had this on the wrong date on my calendar. And I'm so very sorry to Candice and to all of you who've been waiting. Such is life, being human. Sometimes it's hard. But anyway, Candice, hello. Thank you for being
Hi.
here, being flexible. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. Are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you fantastically.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Oh, I'm so glad people are still here. I was like
Yes.
logging on to the, I was like, I don't know. Let me
No,
see
I
where
think
we
this
are.
is such a great one. I think people have been waiting for. So again, I
Yes,
apologize. Thank you for your patience and grace with
of
my
course.
lip.
No worries.
All
Okay.
right. So this is being recorded. And so we will have the replay available, but we are just going to turn the time over to you. So I'm going to make you a co-host so you can share your screen
Awesome.
and we can get going.
Okay.
But first of all, yes, everyone in the chat, if you just want to pop in and say hello, your name, where you're tuning in from, and what type of food creator business you have. All right, and you have co-host powers now, Candice.
All right. I will get my screen ready. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Are you guys able to see? Sorry.
Yes, looks great.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna honestly just dive right into things, but before I do, just quick intro if for those that may not know who I am. So I'm also a food photographer and blogger and business coach. I spent, I don't know, I've been a food photographer and blogger for like 3 years now. Prior to that, I was in corporate sales for 10 years. So I've kind of like bridged the two skills. And now I am teaching and helping and coaching food photographers and bloggers on how to really like scale their business and pitch and sell themselves effectively, negotiate. So that's kind of what I'm going to be touching on today, more specifically how to find the right brands, but looking at it from a different lens than just kind of like the basics. I kind of want to dive deeper into like how I qualify a brand before I ever even go down the process of starting to pitch, really to maximize time. I'm all about like creating process and workflow and efficiency so that you can maximize your time and see results. So that's kind of my teaching method. But okay, so we will just kick things off. So a couple of things I just kind of want to show you where we're going to be going today. So how to find the right brands to pitch, finding the right contact. That's a big common question. So we'll touch on that. And then establishing long-term partnerships. So I just want to start off by sharing this quote because when I worked in sales, this always helped kind of like center me when I felt like I was being, I feel like sales has just a bad negative connotation and we kind of feel icky trying to pitch ourselves and sell. Um, and so I try to always think about this, like focusing on creating value and building trust with your potential clients. Like that's really all sales is about, and building relationships that is founded on trust will yield long-term partnerships. So I'm going to touch on how we can do that in our industry and really any industry. I'm gonna move the box over here so I can, there we go. Okay. So I want to start off by defining when I say prospect, you guys probably know this, it's pretty basic, but I just want to clarify what I mean by prospect. It's a brand. It's anyone that, you're trying to reach out to, that you're interested in potentially working with, whether that's for a sponsored blog post or if you just want to pitch freelance photography. It's just anyone that you're reaching out to. So when I say prospect, it's just somebody who I am trying to create an opportunity with or a potential partnership with. So that's essentially what I said there. So qualifying your prospect. This is kind of like the nitty gritty of what I want to go into and spend a lot of time on today. So oftentimes I hear when I'm coaching students, they say, I just keep finding these brands that want me to work in exchange for product, or they want me to work for free, or they want me to work for free first before they move to a paid partnership. It's really common. We all come across it. We hear it all the time. It's really frustrating. It's never going to go away. There's always going to be those brands that have that expectation. So I believe, and this is what I was taught in corporate sales, is like how to qualify our prospect, how to qualify the right brands before we ever even approach them or go down that path, will really maximize your efforts when you are pitching. So these are the four factors, the four things that must align for a brand to be ready to buy. And I just want to say, this is not just our industry. This is like across all industries. This is kind of like gold standard, what I even saw and encountered when I was in sales. Like these are the four, happen to also be the four most common objections that we hear. And I'm going to go into each one and give examples. But the reason why these are the four factors that must align before they're ready to buy, these are usually, like I said, correlated to also reasons why they may be hesitant to move forward with a partnership. So the way that I'm able to close more opportunities is I try to isolate which one is holding the brand back. But before I ever even get to that stage, I'm using these as like a benchmark or a checklist just for myself to determine, okay, do they have all of these things? And if they do, then it increases my chances of like a viable partnership actually happening. So this is kind of like what we're going to go through today. So the first one sounds really obvious, right? Like obviously they need to have a need. But the challenge is sometimes that need doesn't always look obvious to us. Or they may not know that they have a need. So it's really our job. I like to think of myself not as like a food photographer or a blogger. I like to think of myself as a consultant. To the brand, like a marketing consultant. And so when essentially what I do to try to uncover this need is I try to do this early and often. So this is like the first step of the buying process or the pitching process, if you will. So a brand needs to have some sort of business challenge that we're trying to help them with. And essentially, if we don't know what that is, the goal is to uncover that in some way by either jumping on a discovery call. And I have some questions that I'm going to share in a little bit here about what I ask on a discovery call to uncover this. But really, like, this is the quickest way for you to determine if a brand that you're approaching or trying to pitch to, for you to determine, is it worth my time investing in building a relationship with them potentially? So I kind of use this benchmark. Like first I focus on this. I'm like, okay, do they have a need? So two ways to uncover a need, like I said, would be to jump on a discovery call. And then the other way is to research the brand before sending a pitch. And I'm going to elaborate more on what that looks like how to do the research, what you're trying to kind of uncover or look for when you're researching, and then how you can use that to put it into your pitch email. And I know Abby's made this reference too. Like, I don't know, your terminology might be slightly different than mine, but like making the ask or showing value based on what you've researched. Okay, so the next one is budget. And I know this one is tricky because this is the this is the objection that we come across probably the most. Whether they don't have budget or maybe they don't have enough budget to pay your rates, it's probably the most common and the most difficult for most people to overcome this objection. So I like to tackle this question early and often in the sales process. So what I mean by that is, like, we obviously won't know their budget, right, before we reach out to them, but there are ways to kind of gauge if they even pay for this type of work. I mean, you can look to see if they worked with other photographers. Do they do sponsored posts? Are you receiving ads from them? That's an indication they likely have marketing budget. Those are just some quick, easy ways. You can also do some digging on their website to see, do they work with a marketing agency? That's also an indication that they have budget. or looking at like their news on their website and or their blog to see if they have anything recent that's happened. Like maybe they have a new product launch, or maybe they've updated their product to make it better, enhance it. So there's just all these little ways where you can kind of ask yourself, okay, based on this information that I'm given, does it look like they have budget potentially to spend on sponsored posts, sponsored blog posts, and or photography services? The third one is timeline and bandwidth. This one is kind of overlooked, but also I think the easiest to overcome. Um, Not only when you're in like the closing stage of it. So I'm kind of like speaking about this from the lens of like how to find the right brands, but also once you are talking to a brand, like how do you actually close the opportunity? Because these are in sync with each other. So timeline and bandwidth. It's really the team or the marketing team, and they have so many aspects to their job that sorry, are you able to hear me? It just said my internet connection is unstable. So I'm hoping that it didn't cut out.
There was a
Um,
small little blip, but I don't
yeah,
think we missed anything.
okay, that was really strange. This is like always where I do my presentation, so I've never had that happen. So anyways, so reaching out, like I'll just give you an example. So I mean, well, to go back to what I was saying, so they have a lot of different parts of their job, right? And we're just like one teeny tiny fraction. And oftentimes we'll be sending this pitch and we'll be like, oh gosh, they're not responding, or they just, that means that they don't want to work with me. But we have to realize they have so many other things going on in their day to day that they don't necessarily, we're not like the forefront of their mind, right? So before we ever reach out to a brand, we can establish a timeline. So let's say right now, we're in the thick of spring. Ideally, we'd be pitching for like summer, maybe even fall content. It might be a little early for fall content, but some brands might be planning out that far in advance. So I just use this kind of like as a benchmark once I start reaching out to brands. And once I'm like, okay, I've kind of determined they have a need. It looks like they might have budget. And then I kind of ask myself, like, okay, is there like a specific timeline that I can tie them to? Meaning, if I'm reaching out now and my pitch says like there's no clear timeline of when I'm trying to work with them, I could easily create one by saying, I am reaching out to see if you have a need for summer content, and maybe you propose a few ideas around summer content. So your timeline would then be, we need to work on drafting up a contract and a relationship and a partnership now so that I can have time to create summer content for you. So that's kind of how I use like timeline. Bandwidth just means that, like I mentioned, they have competing priorities. They have other parts of their job that they're focused on. So like really creating a sense of urgency, like why work with you now versus later, or like why respond to your pitch now versus later. So and I'll get into like a few examples here as well. And then the last one is desire or trust. So this one this one's probably the easiest to figure out. So what I do is I'll go on their social media and I'll say, okay, so for desire, it's more like, are they up to date with marketing strategies?
Are you hoping
So I will go to their website, I will go to their social media page, and sometimes we will say, okay, it looks like they have really outdated images on their social media. Like it looks like they could use some love or some help. Sometimes those aren't the best opportunities because, like, let's say they're just not really posting regularly and they're not really using video content yet. To me, that would be a sign that maybe they're just not sold yet on investing in these marketing strategies. And it's going to be the hardest for you to convince out of all four of these. It's going to be the hardest for you to convince a brand that you're sending a pitch email to see the value in that and actually invest in that. They first have to be bought and sold into the fact that up-to-date marketing strategies are worth the investment, which can be really challenging to do. Not to say it can't be done. I just personally, as a freelance entrepreneur, I would rather spend my time trying to convert brands that are up to date with marketing strategies. So again, I will go to their social media to kind of figure this out. And then at that point, like I use this checklist and I'm like, okay, I obviously have to then sell them on the fact that, they can trust that I'm going to create performing content for them. So really like going back to the common objections that we encounter, is they have to have a trust, right, in you and a desire to work with you as well. So I'll give you a few examples on how I am able to kind of move the needle and overcome that. So the first thing I do is I create a list of brands to reach out to that I want to pitch for a given month. Um, and I kind of do a combination of like dream brands that might take a little bit longer, and as well as more practical, maybe smaller to mid-sized companies and or local companies, depending on your market. I'm in Seattle, so I have a really good food market here. And then I do some research. And when I'm researching, actually, I'm going to go back. When I research them, I am asking myself, like, do they have all four of these criteria? Like, could they potentially? We truly won't know until we engage with them, right? But this is how I at least try to qualify them as much as possible before I go down the entire path of like sending a pitch and figuring out, through research what they could potentially need. Because it takes a lot of time. I know everyone's strategy is different. My pitching strategy, I spend a lot of time researching the brand and really coming up with like um, a custom ask, if you will, or a custom pitch so that I can yield higher conversion. So my goal is to email fewer brands, but to have the ones that I do email respond and then convert to a paying client. Okay, so just a few examples. This is more so like how get to give you ideas on how to find brands if you're kind of struggling and you feel like you're always finding those brands that either don't have enough budget or want you to work in exchange for product. This is nothing revolutionary. Like this is nothing different than I think a lot of us are doing, but I did just want to highlight for those that might need a starting point. So looking in your pantries, obvious grocery store aisles, finding brands that you use and love. This would be really important for sponsored work. But for freelance work, you really don't have to have experience with using the product if you're just trying to pitch them on taking photos for them to use on their site or their social channels and you're not doing anything sponsored. And then also, like I had mentioned before, who are you getting ads from on Instagram, because they likely have budget if they're spending marketing budget on ads. And then sometimes I'll even do a little bit of just market research. So I will maybe Google some of their competitors within their niche, and I'll just see who's showing up on the second, third, fourth page of Google. Everyone wants to be on the first page and everyone wants to compete with the big guys, right? So I will actually approach those brands versus the brands that are on the first page of Google. And then of course, depending on your market, any local food brands and or restaurants if you want to do restaurant photography. Okay, so researching the brand. So again, this is nothing revolutionary either, but it's a really critical, important step that I want to emphasize and spend some time on. So now that you have a list of potential brands to work with, essentially you're going to research them. So all brands need marketing content. So at some point, theoretically, all brands might need your services, but again, the timing has to align when you're reaching out to them. That's why I use that like checklist of the four criteria. So oftentimes we think, if they come back to us and they're like, we don't really have any opportunities right now, we take it personal and we're like, okay, they just don't want to work with me. But really, again, if you go back to that checklist and you ask yourself like, okay, the timing doesn't work, that's fine. Then I will circle back with them at a different time or ask them when would be a better time. So that's kind of how I use it. But when you're researching a brand, really the goal is you're trying to uncover some sort of need or business challenge that they're having. This is the easiest way to get a brand to buy from you versus just sending a generic pitch and then asking, they come back and they're like, can you send me your media kit? That's fine, but it's harder to convert those brands if you don't really truly know what their challenge is or what their business need is. So what are you even looking for when you research? here's a couple of things that you can ask yourself as you're researching a brand. So I've already mentioned a few of them, but how present are they on social media? So are they using stock images? Are they using consumer images? Does it lack brand consistency? These are all questions I kind of ask myself. And again, think of like you as being an investigator, like you're just investigating and trying to learn as much as possible about the brand before you ever reach out. Um, so in that case, they might need consistent imagery for um, for to create brand awareness on their social media for social media strategy. I will also kind of look and see, did the brand just update their packaging? Like I'll go to the news feed on their website, I'll go to LinkedIn, I'll just try to figure out anything that's going on in their business where I can then position my service as being an asset or something that would be helpful for them at this time. I will look to see if they have a blog. This one seems pretty obvious, but if you're pitching freelance work, this could be a really great opportunity. Maybe they don't update their blog regularly enough, and that could be an easy sell for you to reach out and say, I can create content for you. I'm a blogger myself, or I'm a food photographer, or recipe developer, and I can help you in this area. So I'm just asking myself all these questions as I'm researching them. And then another one is like, are they heavily promoting one product over the other? Like, is it showing you that maybe they're focused on one specific type of product? And then, you could see if you've created anything that might help them enhance that message to their audience. Um, and then the other thing, I actually just did this recently and I shared it in my pitching workshop, but taking a look at like their social channels and their analytics. So looking at like their video content and or their posts and seeing what's performing so that you can get a sense of what is working for the brand and what's not working. And then you can pitch them on ideas that are additional ideas that are based on what's working for them. So like the example that I gave in my pitching workshop was like a brand that's a ice cream they have ice cream products as well as cheese and creamery. And I went to their page and I'm like, okay, it looks like the reels that are performing really well are all hacks, like some sort of hack, like refrigeration organization, or how to like rewrap the cheese once you've opened it to keep it fresh. So then I go back and I'm like, okay, what could I do as a hack? How could I pitch them on that? Like, how could I give them and offer them some ideas on that? So here is an example of a pitch, not a full pitch, but just like an aspect of, okay, let's say I went to their webpage and I uncovered that they recently rebranded their products or they launched new products. My messaging might sound something like this. I imagine that your rebrand and new product launch is a top priority for you this year. So I'm showing them that I've done my research. I know that they've launched new products. And then I give a few examples of how I might be able to help them with their marketing around this specific need. If somebody's launching new products, I would look at it from a business perspective. They're probably going to be focused on creating brand awareness on these around these new products. So that's essentially what I would say in my pitch email. Like, are you in need of updated product images, or do you need new recipes to create brand awareness around your new packaging? Another important question to ask when you're researching is, do you have an understanding of who the brand is trying to reach? So this is really, really important. Even more so when you're pitching for sponsored work or influencer type work, like really understanding. Actually, it's also important for freelance work. Just understanding who the brand is trying to reach, like who's their target audience, what's their brand messaging. And then showing them that you can help them reach their target audience through your content creation and or images. So I like to give this example because I have one client that I've worked with for a year that just kind of like checks off the box of like your typical scenario when you're pitching, and then they're like, oh, we don't have any opportunities. And then I went back and I did this. I went back and I did the research, and I'm like, okay, they don't have a blog. That's very strange for a food product. So I essentially said, you guys don't really have a blog. Would it be helpful if I created recipes using your product and just giving your audience new ways? And I did my research and I asked on the discovery call questions to uncover information about their audience, like who's your target audience. And I realized as an ice cream company, they were targeting kids and moms. And so I was able to, on the spot, give them ideas on the discovery call, to immediately establish like credibility and trust with them. And I've now been working with them for almost a year creating recipes. So just to show you like how I use and leverage that research, and then trying to understand and uncover like who their target audience is. And then this kind of just goes back to what I was saying, like positioning yourself as an expert idea generator. Like that's what we do as content creators, essentially. I'm just going to call us content creators because that's what we do. Is you are coming up with ideas, whether it's for your own blog or it's for another brand, you're coming up with ideas that are going to perform. I would think if you're creating recipes for your blog, you're creating recipes that you think your audience is going to respond to. So essentially we're doing that same concept just for a brand. And like I said, all brands need content. So it's just a matter of finding the brands that check the box for all four of that criteria at the time that you're pitching to them. And there's only so much we can control, but I will at least use this as a checklist to kind of gauge if I want to spend my efforts on the brand. Okay, so finding the right contact. I know this is like a really big question and struggle that we all encounter, including myself. I'm no different. And I just want to say, I don't have any like special, unique way that I go about doing this. I also want to explain from a perspective of like, corporations pay money and they have resources available to them to buy contacts. Okay. So, us as solopreneurs, we don't have those resources. The best way to find a contact is to engage with the brand organically wherever they live. Okay. So, that for some brands, it's LinkedIn. For most brands, it's probably TikTok now and or Instagram. But following them and turning on post notifications, engaging with their stories, you want it to be organic, not come off fake, right? It's the same concept with your audience on Instagram for your own blog. Like you want to build genuine connection. I do think LinkedIn is not utilized enough in our industry. And I do think there's a lot of value to LinkedIn. So one of the ways that I would use it, let's just say you are given like the generic email, like the hello at whatever the company's name is, or marketing. I will go to LinkedIn and I will just try to do some research to figure out, okay, who's even in the marketing department there? And I will at least get a name and I will connect with them on LinkedIn. And if I truly can't find the contact, I will just email the generic email. And I don't want to say finding the right contact is less important, but I think if you cannot find the right, like a specific email, it's more important to ensure that your pitch email is really stellar and that you've done the time to research and really propose a few ideas, because it's going to increase the chances that they're going to respond. And then from there, you get the correct point of contact. And this has happened to me several times where I will email like a general email, and then the one person that manages it will either email me back. And now I have so this happened recently with a brand that I pitched to last year. I just I'm trying to re-engage them now. And I have the email of the person in PR and influencer relations, which is fine. That's a great contact, but I would rather do freelance work for them than sponsored work. So I'm going to target trying to find the person that's like the VP or the manager of marketing. So I'm connected with the PR influencer person on LinkedIn and I have like her email alias. So now I can go on LinkedIn and I can just try to find her manager essentially, and I will just email her directly. Without ever having to ask for a contact. I now know what it is because I have the email alias from the other person. So that's getting like really trying to figure out the right person, like if you really want to devote time to it. But the easiest, best way that I do it is honestly, I send them a DM on Instagram. And I would say 90% of the time I will get a direct contact that way. But yeah, so again, nothing terribly different. You have to ask yourself, like, how much time do you want to invest on one company to try to find the right contact? Like, don't be paralyzed by if you can't find the right contact. Like, I would say send the pitch, like do the research, send the custom pitch, try to get the contacts that way by just getting them to respond to your email. Um, and then you could also obviously go to their website, see if they have anything like the generic email listed if you can't get it through DM. But some of the titles that you would be looking for if you are wanting to explore on LinkedIn is like VP of marketing or marketing manager. Sometimes they're creative directors, social media manager, PR, influencer relationships. Um, and then sometimes you'll uncover through messaging them on Instagram that they work with an agency and they might just give you the agency email. So there's a lot of different ways. But again, like if you're feeling paralyzed by this part of the process, just send the email and see what happens. And you can spend time down the road as you're establishing a relationship with brands to try to uncover more like more contacts during that time. I just want to briefly mention too, like understanding the roles within an organization is really impactful because what motivates each person in the organization is going to be very, very different. So when you are sending a pitch email, I would just encourage you to like always verify if you do have a direct contact. I would always verify by going to LinkedIn and seeing what their role is, just so I can understand like what is even their objective in working with me. Like if I were to send them a pitch, I need to send them a pitch that's going to light them up and use words that apply to their specific job or their day to day, like whatever their goals are going to be. So I just have a couple of examples. Like a social media manager is going to care about very different things than the marketing manager. The marketing manager is like, they're more looking at it from like a macro lens and they just want to execute on their overall marketing goals, which is typically founded upon like how much business or sales that they're making. So they usually work closely with their sales team. The social media manager probably cares more about just how the social media campaign went, how it performed. So just ask yourself that and like think about it through that lens when you're reaching out to individuals. Here's a quick DM example that I use. It's honestly like just a mini pitch. This one's a little bit lengthy, but you can keep it really short and sweet. But I essentially use my pitch formula, which is like reaching out to them, making a genuine connection, and then telling them what you do, what you offer, and then just keeping it really simple. Like if you're reaching out now, I would say something about summer content, and then just making the ask, which is asking for the contact. So I think of like moving or like climbing a staircase. This would be like one little step, and then you're just trying to like move the needle slightly. And this is just one. So the first step would be getting the contact. So that's the entire purpose of this pitch. So yeah, I thought this would be helpful to show you kind of what I say. So as a recap, essentially I will research the brand, and then I will try to identify a gap or something that they might be lacking in their marketing strategy. So then I can position my services as the solution. So I will send them a pitch with a few ways that I can help them with this. And then I just want to see how we are doing on timing because I know we started a little bit.
And we can go over a little bit if you need to, but
Okay.
we have 9 minutes to the hour.
Cool. Okay. I can wrap up in that time. So, okay. So establishing brand relationships. So I'm sure you guys have all heard WIFM. It's just like, what's in it for me, right? So I always try to think before I send an email, try to have this lens of like, what's in it for me, not like me, but to the person I'm emailing, right? So what's in it for them? I never want to send an email. I never want to just send an email, say, hey, just checking in. There's no value to that. You're not really establishing any sort of rapport relationship. So I try to keep this like at the forefront when I'm trying to establish a relationship with brands to keep them engaged. So like, how can I communicate value before I ever send them an email? And just thinking like, how can I keep moving the needle with them one step further? So I'll like go back and see where we left off in our previous email. And then I'll honestly go back to the drawing board. And I typically will reach out every quarter unless they say, like, unless they give me a very specific time frame where they respond to my pitch and they're like, you know what, we don't have anything right now, but maybe reach out. Maybe they'll be like, reach out in Q4 or reach out for fall content. So if I have a specific timeline, then I'll reach back out when they told me to. Um, but I will essentially go back to the process that I just shared with you, and I will do my research and I will just like send them a new pitch with new ideas. And that's what I did recently, with the example I shared with the creamery. I had not reached out to them. It had been a year, and that's because I had a baby and I was not pitching anymore. So there's like this huge gap, right, of a year, which normally I would reach out quarterly. But I went back and I did my research and I was like, went to their webpage and I was like, oh, they've updated their ice cream flavors and we're about to enter into summer months. So I sent them a pitch on some ice cream recipe ideas. This was literally last week, so we'll see if they respond. I'll keep you posted. So frequency, I already mentioned this, but I like to reach out quarterly to just maintain that relationship. And then I go back to my prospecting process, which is researching the brand and then asking myself, how can I add additional new value? So honestly, I restart the process like every month, every quarter. Another way to establish a relationship, and this is more so once you're starting to work with brands, is focusing on the client experience. So, how can you show them that you're a member of the team, an extension of their team, an asset that they can't lose? This is the easiest way to continue a partnership. Um, and how can you effectively manage expectations once you've started working with a brand? So it really starts with understanding our role and that we are an asset to our clients. And if our role is to create content that helps our clients solve a marketing challenge, we must first have an understanding of what those challenges are so that we can then create content that has the highest chance of performing for the client. So here's an example. I kind of asked myself, like, so first off, I'm like, what are even challenges, right, that they overcome? So, like, they typically don't have access to a certain type of audience, so they're wanting to partner with us to access that audience, or they don't have enough reach for their product, so they're trying to broaden their reach, or they have. These are just a few examples. They have competitors, obvious, right? They have competitors that they're competing with. So, like, why would they even work with us? They probably lack bandwidth to create new content or new ideas, and they lack resources to professional images and or video. So that's why they would hire us, right? And then I think about, okay, so I have to create work that performs for the client. So I actually work backwards. I don't come up with recipe concepts after a client has signed a contract with me. I actually come up with recipe ideas before we ever like even sign a contract to try to, it's like a selling point for me. It's a way to show value to them if I can. And I'll kind of talk through how I do that, but essentially I hop on a discovery call with them and I ask them questions to uncover, like, what are the metrics you're trying to hit? What's important to you? If it's a sponsored post campaign, what is going to show that this partnership was a mutually beneficial partnership? And then I will, for example, maybe they're like, oh, you can come up with any recipe that your audience will respond to. We're fine with that. So then I will go and I'm like, okay, great. I have some ideas of the type of content. My audience likes cakes. I mean, my Instagram handles eat more cakes. So there you go. So people know me for cakes. So I'm like, okay, great. Let's do a cake. So I just try to think, like, what are their goals? If they can see an ROI from working with you, then this will be an easy yes to continue hiring you and building that relationship. And I do this through the discovery call. So, like, the goals of the discovery call is to establish a relationship between you and the potential client. And this usually happens, you send them a pitch email. And then my goal with the initial pitch is to always try to get them either on like a quick discovery call, or I send them my discovery questions via email if they can't jump on a call. And again, getting on a call is always better because you can try to establish a relationship, but you're asking like open-ended questions to uncover their specific marketing needs. And then you're showing value by aligning your service to help that client overcome those challenges. So I'll go back to that ice cream example. I got this client on the phone And that's where I asked her these questions, and I was able to uncover that they were actually launching a blog like 4 months before. When we were talking, it was like 4 months from that point. And she was like, actually, we do have a need for recipe development and for images. And I was like, great, let's do it. But that's how I was able to like get on a call and figure out really like what they would need from me. And then I pitched her on ideas like on the fly when we were on the phone. Not to say that you have to do this, but like I knew that this would increase my chance of them gaining trust and working with me. Like, oh, she can come up with ideas for us too. That's amazing. Like that's one less thing off my plate as somebody on the marketing team that I don't now have to focus on. I can rely on, she's more than just a photographer and recipe developer. She also can come up with these ideas. So it's one less thing that they have to do. Um, Here's a few discovery questions. So, which products are focused for your marketing team this quarter season, and why? And the why is really important because that's where they unpack, and you just like listen to what they say, and they'll kind of tell you what's going on in their business, and it gives you a really good indication of like, is this going to be a one-time partnership or could this be a long-term partnership potentially? Um, what are you hoping to achieve with custom brand imagery? What are some actionable and measurable goals? Again, this is how I like to figure out like what are they going to use as a metric to see if it was a good partnership, because I want to create content that I know has the highest chance of like hitting that metric. So this is a really really important question. And then a couple of other ones are like, what type of content is your audience responding to or not responding to? And this is like, you can kind of figure out by going to their social media, but just getting them to talk so that you can learn about their audience, learn about like what's going well. And then you can create ideas, more ideas around that. I do have my discovery call questionnaire guide that you guys can download for free. I have, there's like a link. Abby maybe can send it out afterwards, but so I actually have all my questions. So I have like your typical process questions, like how many images do you need? How are you going to use the images? But I also have these like open-ended questions for them as well. That is really what helps you kind of like unpack their challenges, and then that's where you can be a consultant and make a recommendation for your services based on what they tell you. And then this is it, customer experience, just focusing on customer experience. A few ways that I do that is I will have a kickoff call. And this is where I'm either working with the agency or the person, my point of contact internally, where we can align on anything specific about the shoot. What's the best way to communicate together? Do they want, do they want to see the props beforehand? Do they want me to be in communication with them on the day of the shoot? Just anything like their brand styling. And then another easy way is like sending a welcome packet that includes an FAQ document. And this could be like, if you're getting repeated questions from clients or just like anything that they keep asking you via email, I just put it on like a 1-page document so that they can reference that. Like, okay, we've signed a contract. Now what happens? So then you can really clearly outline like what's going to happen next so that they feel taken care of and heard and seen, and they can kind of like let go and let you run the show now. And then I know a lot of people do this, creating a mood board, and this is just to like align on the visuals and make sure that it's it's what they want to see, whether it's like brand colors or just inspirational photos. I personally don't do this a ton, but I know a lot of photographers do, and it works really well on improving that customer experience and also just managing those expectations as you're working together, about like what they can expect from you. And that's it. So if we have time for Q&A, I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions.
Yeah, we can take about 5 minutes. Thank you. I've learned so many awesome little nuggets of ways to refine the process, because I think it's so interesting hearing from different experts, because everybody's strategy is different and you do what works for you, but there's always things to be learning because you have your own method. And so thank you for sharing your knowledge. So we do have a few questions here in the chat that I can moderate. So Cheryl is asking, can you pitch 2 different ideas in the same email, or do you keep them separate?
Yeah, I mean, why not? There's nothing wrong with that. I sometimes will pitch like multiple ideas if something comes to mind. I don't really overthink this too much. I do whatever feels natural. Like I said, I'll go to like the research part and I'll be like, okay, if something comes to mind and I have 2 or 3 ideas, I'll pitch them on those 2 to 3 ideas. If anything, it broadens your chance of them like biting on one of those ideas, right? So I actually think it's a benefit to do that. Um, so yeah, I say if you have more, the better.
Great. Tembi is wondering, how can you sell yourself if you are just starting out so you don't have any previous work to showcase? I understand you can create a portfolio of non-paid work to showcase your abilities, but if they are asking about what you've done in terms of being a part of a marketing campaign, et cetera, how do you position yourself?
Yeah, that's so getting the first client and just starting out can feel really overwhelming because you feel like you don't have a lot to show. But that's not necessarily the case. So, yes, portfolio is one. And also, I just want to say portfolio is not just unpaid work, it's just any photos that you take. It's whatever you produce in your studio and your image that you own, you can put in your portfolio. It doesn't have to be anything that you did for a brand, it could be your images that you take for your own blog. It's just your portfolio is just showing them essentially like what your imagery style is and what you're capable of photographing. So yeah, a strategy is to like for you to kind of like go and if you're wanting to target specific brands, I would say sometimes it's helpful to work backwards, like go pick up their packaging and like incorporate those ingredient shots or incorporate their packaging like into one of your images just for your own portfolio. And then now you have that added to it, right? Where you have like packaging shots. But it's just about communicating value to them. So if you haven't worked with a brand before, you can still communicate value. An easy way that I did this when I was first starting out is I would send a pitch email or a DM. And I would just say, my audience, and my audience was small. Like we all start somewhere, right? Like I had a couple thousand followers, and I essentially just engaged with my audience, pulled my audience on Instagram, and I was like, do you guys care about the ingredients that I use? So this would be more for sponsored work, but I would then put that into my mini pitch and I would say, my audience is really interested in um, learning about the products that I use and why in my baking, because I focus on baking. So whatever your niche is. And then I would just say, like, I have a few ideas or ways that I can incorporate your product into some of my recipes. Is there a contact that I can reach out to? So like you're showing value by saying my audience is interested in learning about your product. If you think that, this particular brand would align, like your audiences align well. If it's just for freelance work, I honestly think it's irrelevant what your experience is. You just have to find a brand that matches those 4 criteria. So just keep asking yourself that when you're reaching out and like asking yourself, how can I communicate like the value that I offer? Maybe you have like a reel that went viral. I mean, it really can be anything. There's so many different ways. But that's what I did in the beginning. I was just like, hey, my audience is interested in learning about your product. I mean, that makes their ears perk up. That's what they want to hear. So you just have to think about with them, right? What's in it for them?
That's awesome. Vasanti is wondering, how do you calculate your rates? Would you change them based on the budget the brand comes back with?
Um, oh, this is a good question. I will try to keep my answer short. And so I I send them these discovery type questions, and one of the questions in there is what their budget is. Okay. So I'll get some sort of insight generally what their budget is. But I've had this recently where brands are like, just send me your rates. And I'm like, no, you got to fill out my questions first because I need to figure out the best way for us to work together. And then I can kind of gauge like, is my pricing going to be over their budget? So I always have my pricing higher than their budget because they're usually not telling you like their max budget. They're usually telling you like just an idea. And so you always want to pitch higher so you have room to negotiate down and so that you can still profit if they're like, oh, we don't have, let's just for the sake of an example, we don't have $1,000 budget. We only have 750 as our budget. So actually this happened to me recently with a brand. I pitched them on, I think it was like, I sent them a quote for $1,100 and they were like, oh, our budget's only 750. And I'm like, that's a big difference. So I gave them 2 options and I said, well, for that rate, I can either do this. I can cut my recipe development fee in half if we use a recipe I've already developed, and I'll just swap your ingredient in there because there's no recipe development that I realistically have to do. It's already been done. Um, so I'm able to cut costs there. So I got my price down to like 950 instead. Whereas, but it's still over budget for them, right? But I did that anticipating that they might have additional, a little bit addition more than 750. And or I'll give them another option. If they want to do it for 750, then I take down my deliverable. So I'm like, you're not going to get everything you asked for. I will do it for that price, but I'm not going to be offering XYZ. I'm just going to be offering XY. So I'll just change the job to make it less work for me. So that's a couple of ways is you can give them options, or you can just give them one option that's closer to their budget.
I think that's great advice. Audrey would like to know, how do you respond when the pitch email sent to a general email is answered by an admin who says they don't currently need a freelance photographer?
That is tricky. I don't have that happen a lot, but if it does happen, I either try to make a different ask. So instead of like freelance, I might ask for sponsored or something else. Or like I said, go to LinkedIn, do some research, try to figure out who the person is. That's not just an admin. I actually encountered this a lot in my corporate job. I was trying to pitch to CFOs who are very busy people. So like a C-level executive is not going to respond to a salesperson's email. So I would always get an admin or somebody that was like didn't care what I was pitching them on, right? So you could try to figure out like what would motivate that person to respond to you, like what would be valuable to them if they're just an admin, like what's going to make their life easier, and you could try to establish a relationship with them, or just ask them, hey, do you have another contact I could reach out to that might be a better person for me to correspond with? Like there's nothing wrong with asking that. So there's a couple different directions you can go.
Wonderful. Does anybody have any remaining questions before we jump?
And I just realized I was still sharing my screen.
Oh, no, you're fine. And I'm going to, let's see. I put the free download with the brand questionnaire that Candice has generously provided for everybody. So I'm going to put that here in the chat one more time so you guys can go through and click there and get her information. So Candice, before we sign off, where can everybody find you? Do you have anything else that you want to tell us about how we can follow along with what you do?
Yeah, I have two accounts. So my blog account is Eat More Cake by Candice, which I think most people like know me from there, but I've actually kind of not been on there as active. My business like coaching account where I offer a lot of free business advice and tips is the Confident Pitch, which is just the name of my online course as well, the Confident Pitch program, which only launches twice a year. So it hasn't launched yet. I'm launching it again this summer. I don't have like specific dates yet because I'm actually revamping it right now. But yeah, so I would say that the Confident Pitch is the best place to kind of like follow along if you need help with pitching or process or anything like that, then feel free to reach out to me. And I have a lot of different ways that I work with creators. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for sharing your expertise and being here today. As I mentioned before, the replay for this will be available with all the additional resources, and hopefully we can grab your slides from you too. So we'll have all of that uploaded, and then you can reach out to Candice. We'll have her information included there, and you can see her handle here in the chat as well. So thank you, Candice, and everybody. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Happy Friday.